A new series today, all mixed up. And you get a little hint of how we're going to mix up the sanctuary with the seats, and it's just going to get worse. We're also going to play around with the order of worship and mix things up in that, which will drive some of you crazy. It would drive me crazy because I'm the kind of guy, I expect routine, I expect order, organization. I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets. Who's like me? Yes. Well, we're just going to have to deal with it this week and next week because there are things in this world that don't work for people like me and those who raise their hands. There are things in this world that just get mixed up. There are things in this world that questions and confusions and issues that we cannot organize into nice little boxes and tie them up. There are things in this world that no matter how much we want them to work right, there's just gaps. Gaps in our understanding, gaps in the way they fit together, gaps in the way the world is put together. In this whole series, we're going to deal with the problems and the anxieties in our lives, the difficulties and the chaos in the world, the mysteries of our faith that seem all mixed up. And this isn't just my idea. Blame it on the new members. So it's Amy's fault, and it's Nancy's fault, and Kathy's not here today, but it's her fault. Actually, in the new member class a few months ago, we took some time to brainstorm questions about faith and church and God and how we fit with all of that stuff. And some of the new members wrote one or two questions. Some people weren't even really in the new member class. They were just there to take part and learn a little bit about the whole process. So they wrote down some questions. Some of the new members wrote down dozens of questions. And they hung them all up, and I told them, don't worry, they're confidential, so I don't have a clue whose hand, they're too new, I don't know their handwriting yet, so I don't know who wrote what, and you won't either, so, and even if we did, most of the questions they wrote are so universal, we all can share some of these questions, but they wrote them, they were raw, they were open, they were vulnerable, and I think we can all learn something from their questions, so each week we're going to start with some of their questions. So, for instance, read that one out for us. What does that say?
How do science and religion affect you?
How does science and religion affect you? Theologically and geometrically, I suppose. For most of the history of the church, there really wasn't a conflict with those things, Galileo accepting. It's really only been a recent deal where people have realized they can sell tickets to each side if they fight. So there's been this boxing match in most of our lifetime about science and faith. And most of the book club studied this recently. We did a whole series on science and faith. And most everyone was pretty comfortable with good compatibility there. And the next book club is on the history of Christian theology. So that's the plug, Christian theology coming up. Okay, this one's a trickier one.
Devil's story in church, fallen angel, and what does it mean?
The devil and the fallen angel, and what does it mean? I don't know. It's weird. November 2014, there was a sermon here about Revelation, and so if anyone has that kind of question, go listen to that because that's all I've got. Once a year maybe I can throw a Revelation sermon out there. Okay, they're gonna get harder. I'll let you read this one.
How would you suggest to begin to formulate a faith that is in tatters? Or formulate a faith that is in tatters.
Formulate a faith that is in tatters. How would you begin to formulate a faith that's all ripped up and all mixed up? I mean, you can keep coming and try to find something. You could talk to other people who've been through faith and their stuff is in tatters. You could try to patch it together in the difficult parts with prayer. Even if you're not convinced what that's going to do, you can try that. Because all of us at some point feel like our life is in some kind of a tatter. That's a heavy question. We got one more. This is the really heavy one. Can you read this one loud and with all the emotion?
Where is God when it hurts?
Where is God when it hurts? Your song talked about pain up there. Where is God when it hurts? Christmas is over, right? It's over. This thing's going to be gone. It's all this. The baby's born. The light is in the darkness. Angels are singing. Shepherds have told their story. They've run back. Mary's holding all these things in her heart, and now she's frustrated with diapers. Like Christmas is over. And I'm okay with that. I'm kind of a guy who's, I'm done with Christmas. I get a lot of it during the year. Sometime later, after Christmas is over, in the story, it might have been a couple of years later, the family, they're making it work in Bethlehem. They're doing everything they can. I guess that Joseph somehow found a carpentry job. Those are the kind of jobs people can move around and get. So Joseph has a steady carpentry job, so they stay for a couple of years. And eventually, these three guys show up from way across the desert, and they're dressed funny, and they make these outlandish claims about this little 2-year-old toddler. That's what the Greek word is, toddler. They make claims about how somehow he's going to be important. He's going to be God. And they think, well, these guys are nice. They brought gifts, but they're very odd. They're like that stranger in the grocery store who comes up to your baby and pinches your baby's cheeks, and you think, lady, boundaries, come on. So these guys, no boundaries. They come and then they leave, and that's usually where we end the Christmas story. Christmas is over, but here are the next verses of the Christmas story. Herod was furious when he realized that the wise men had outwitted him. So he sent soldiers to kill all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, based on the wise men's report of the star's first appearance. Herod's brutal action fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. Years ago, Jeremiah said, "A cry was heard in Ramah." Ramah is a city. "A cry was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeps for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are dead." Where is God when it hurts? That's not fair. That's not right. How could this happen? So some families around Bethlehem massacre the innocents. That's what we call this. And you have to assume some families must have just taken their faith and left it at the church's doorstep and not come back. I refuse to be comforted. How can you believe in a God that lets this happen? And others held on in tatters, like melting wax, just falling through their fingers. How do you hold on to this? I thought God was on our side. I thought God was better than that. Now, Mary and Joseph, they're the lucky ones through this because somehow, and if Hollywood had written the Bible, we would have got the details. How did they get out of this? Herod sent soldiers into this little town. It's a suburb. It's 5 miles away from Jerusalem. Sends all these soldiers down there who are trained. These are Roman soldiers to do something. How did they sneak out? Must have been a great story that has just been lost to history. But somehow, without the dramatic details, they get out. They make it to Egypt. Refugees of a Middle Eastern terrorist. And you have to think, maybe Mary would say, where is God in this? And Joseph, comforting, we made it, so God must be on our side, protecting us. Yeah, but if God is protecting us, why did God let those die? Mary, you can't worry about that. Just give thanks that we are safe. Yeah, but we have to carry this around forever, this massacre. Jesus will grow up knowing that others died because of him. And that guilt could be suffocating. How could Jesus ever trust God when he knew that that's how his story was connected? And those odd men who gave us the gold that allowed us to give people a bribe so we could sneak out, they said Jesus was somehow identified with God. And how could Jesus grow up identifying with a God who let that happen? And the scenario is different for all of us, but months ago you could say, where is God when you saw the picture of the 3-year-old, not a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old washed ashore? You could say, where is God when we have another school shooting, massacring more innocents? Or more personal, where is God when the cancer comes back again and again and again, takes more than you're prepared for, comes faster, comes slower? Where is God when the depression lingers, the addiction seems to be winning? Where is God when the relationship falls apart? Where is God when you need the most because your life is so mixed up? I think there's about three kinds of responses to that question. I've been in ministry for about 20 years, and all the different responses that I hear can be fit into those 3 categories. And we'll go through 3 of them. One of them, where is God? Answer, nowhere. God's nowhere. I thought God was strong. I thought God was involved in my life. I thought I had a relationship. I thought I'd earned something with God, but then that thing happened to my child. Then that thing happened at the car accident. Then that affair came out of nowhere. Then the money just dried up. And I just can't believe anymore. Which really is the hurt talking more than the head or the heart or the faith. The second kind of response, some people try to think their way out of it. How many of you have been in Philosophy 101? I don't know what you call it in Purdue. You've been there? I taught that class, and it was... I kind of liked the part where we get to philosophy of religion, but I didn't like the part where I had to convince people that there wasn't a good answer to this problem of why bad stuff happens, because they would try to think their way out. They'd say, well, God is like this, and God is like that, and if we hold him just right, and if we juggle just right, we can kind of figure out how God is. I was going to juggle up here, but I can't juggle sheep and wise men, because I was going to drop them. Because jugglers always drop eventually, isn't that right? They always drop. And so when you try to have the answer, well, we have bad things so that we know that there are good things in the world. It's like a thermometer. You can't have hot without cold. Okay, that's some kind of an answer. Oh, bad things happen so that we can be stronger, so that communities can have resilience. It's true, we get stronger. Resilience happens. Bad things happen because there's sin in the world. Might be true, but that's a great response. Is that an answer? Does that satisfy us? To me, the answers don't answer much, at least especially when we are in the middle of all of that. So the third attempt, you can try to accept that there just isn't an answer. Things hurt. You can try to accept that there isn't a why for this stuff happening. You can try to trust that God is wherever the pain is, and that's the best that we've got. God isn't absent, but present in our life. God isn't absent, but exactly where we need God the most. Which sounds like a good orientation for our heart, except here's the problem with the answer. If you're not already convinced of that response, and then someone tells you that when you're in the pain, you don't believe that. You can't be. If you're not already convinced of how to orient yourself in the darkness, your soul's just going to be groping for something more than, God's here. God's here in the darkness. Where? We're going to talk about prayer in a few weeks because prayer is one of those things that confuses a lot of us. But I promise, if you practice prayer all the time, even when things are going well, you're going to have a much better time of praying when you need to. And it's the same sort of thing here. If you are prepared for God to be with you when things start to fall apart, it's a lot easier to just entering the storm and trusting that the waves won't overwhelm you even when you see them crashing over your head. So 3 perspectives, and they have gaps in each of them, and that is where faith comes in and works. That is where faith lives, in those gaps. And Jesus tells us, this is my favorite verse in the whole Bible, he tells us, in this world there will be trouble, but take heart, I overcome the world. He says, in this world there will be trouble. Not might be trouble. Doesn't say there's going to be trouble for those who deserve it. Doesn't say, I'm going to send you trouble if you mess up. Jesus does not say that I'm going to send you trouble so you can learn something. Trouble so that you, in your past, so you don't repeat it. Jesus doesn't say any of that. Jesus says there will be trouble. In your future, there will be trouble up ahead. And before we get there, he wants to remind you, take heart, as I overcome a world full of trouble. You might not notice it because you're so blinded. You might not believe it because you feel it so deeply, but take heart, trust, prepare yourself. Get used to how God works in the holes of our understanding as much as in the obvious blessings. And somewhere, while Jesus said that in John 16, Mary's sitting in the crowd and beaming at her son. Oh, I taught him that when he was a boy. He's seen so much pain in his life. He's going to see so much pain in his life. And somehow he trusts that we are never alone when we hurt. Somehow that boy trusts that God always uses that hurt to draw something better out of the world. And she prays, thank you, God, for being with us through these hard years. Thank you for promising to be with us through whatever comes. Amen.